Our final thread of the day is titled simply, "What would you do?" Since this is not a debate on COVID or my boundaries, I'm just curious what others would feel or do if they were in my shoes. I just had a baby a week and a half ago. I have a 2.5-year-old and a 19-month-old. My mother-in-law was a huge help to us postpartum. We were all very cautious about COVID and have only allowed immediate family to meet baby while masked. My mother-in-law is very cautious as well because she is immunocompromised. Well, she somehow got COVID. She tested positive Monday after feeling bad on Sunday. We'd seen her on Saturday, so I was literally so scared and panicked this week that me or my kids or my newborn would start showing symptoms. Luckily, we didn't. Thank goodness. This week, while COVID positive, my mother-in-law has asked my husband to run 2 errands for her. I was totally fine with this and even suggested he ask her if she needed these errands ran, grocery list and taking some of her work stuff so she could work from home. I told my husband, please drop it off on the porch and don't go inside because we have a newborn and an immunocompromised toddler at home. He came home and told me that's exactly what happened. Well, today I called my mother-in-law to check on her and she lets it slip. Oh, while your husband was over here, he was telling me blah, blah, blah. And so I immediately knew that he had lied to me because he told me they didn't even speak. So I called my husband. I very calmly and respectfully asked him what really happened when he went over to mother-in-law's. I told him I had talked to her and she told me that he came inside and they talked. He then changed his story to say that he actually did walk inside the door to set her groceries down because he didn't want her to have to carry them all the way from the porch. And they talked from a distance for maybe 10 minutes. I stayed very calm. I told him I felt that this was very irresponsible of him and I was extremely upset that even after I'd asked he not go inside, he did anyway and then lied to me. I told him I needed some space and didn't want to talk about it anymore because I was very upset. He blew up. He got so mad and tried deflecting, saying I was totally overreacting and how dare I insinuate that he put his family in harm's way and that I was blowing it out of proportion. He barely even stepped inside the house and they stayed at a distance. I just hung up because I'm too emotionally escalated to have a healthy conversation. I keep thinking about how when he came home both times, he immediately held our newborn baby. I'm literally having a full-blown panic attack because I'm now absolutely terrified all over again we're going to get COVID. I'm so hurt by this whole situation. I also feel like it's partially my own fault because I suggested he ask her if she needed her work things picked up and then also if she needed us to do a grocery run. So now I'm even beating myself up over it. If you read this far, thank you. Thoughts, opinions. Would you be mad? Am I overreacting? What would you do? Now, I think the situation is worsened quite a lot by the fact that she has a very, very fresh newborn. She only gave birth a week and a half ago, right? So that's a very, very young kid. I completely understand why she's a little bit hyper anxious about this. And there is clearly the problem with all relationship conflict is that it gets a lot worse when people lie. And so people have this tendency, well, I say people, it's obviously a generalization, but it seems to be that a lot of people have this tendency to go, okay, if I can just avoid dealing with the situation head on, I'll just lie and get out of it and then it'll be fine and then we can all move on and it's not a big deal. And then obviously the moment you lie, trust gets damaged and that becomes a really major problem, right? It escalates the problem so much more. This is, ironically, it should be one of the first lessons that people learn in life, why you shouldn't lie and why you should tell the truth, but it doesn't seem to stick. And in marriages, it's really, really bad. So what the husband did here that was completely messed up is that he lied to her about it, you know? She said, hey, I want you to do it this way. He was like, sure, I'm going to do that. And then he decided not to when he was there. And instead of owning that and just saying that to her and dealing with the fallout from that, he was just like, maybe I'll just be able to avoid this whole thing if I just go, no, I did it exactly as you told me. And that's not good. So that's one aspect of it. That's what the husband really messed up as far as I'm concerned. That said, OP is kind of not very honest. So she says, I stayed very calm. I told him I felt that this was very irresponsible. I told him I needed some space and didn't want to talk about it anymore because I was very upset. And then she says he blew up. And then she says she hung up because I'm too emotionally escalated to have a healthy conversation. So you cannot simultaneously say, I was very calm and was just trying to give him feedback. But I was also very upset and very emotionally escalated to the extent that I had to hang up. because I just couldn't talk to him anymore. Those two are mutually exclusive. They cannot be happening at the same time. So as far as I'm concerned, OP is most likely extremely anxious about the thought of getting sick and getting COVID, which fair enough. I completely understand, especially when you have a very fresh newborn and you have a toddler and, everything else going on around with those two things, when you're still freshly postpartum and you need some time and your body needs recovery time. Of course, you don't want to get sick. So I get why she doesn't want to get sick. That said, clearly her anxiety levels are stressing her husband out to the point that he's like, I just won't tell her the truth about what's happening. When she says he got so mad, he tried to deflect, saying, I was totally overreacting. How dare I insinuate that he put his family in harm's way? I was blowing it out of proportion, etc., etc. So it's like you can really hear the husband's perspective here, where he thinks that she's a little bit over the top and she's trying to control his behavior to an extent that he does not agree with. And then instead of telling her, hey, I think you're a little bit over the top and I don't agree with this, he lied and then had to deal with the fallout. And obviously the fallout was so much worse than it had to be. So I would probably say OP is a little bit over the top in general. And then everything else that she says, that she's beating herself up over the whole situation happening to begin with. If your mother-in-law is sick and you have a good relationship with her, you really care about her health and well-being, it's completely fine to say, hey, we can pick up some groceries for you and do whatever you need to do in order to make that comfortable for both of you. Like, it was a good deed. I wouldn't feel bad for it. And it's okay that he went inside for a few minutes. It's okay that they spoke. You can't do anything to change it. Once you find out that that's how things went down, there is no point. This whole panic attack response is completely a waste of time and a waste of energy. And if anything, the level of stress that you put yourself under is going to make it worse for you in the long run, because that will be the thing that lowers your post-stress. So after the stress response, your immune system will crash, and then suddenly you'll be much more susceptible to catching things and get sick a lot easier. So there's no reason to panic. When these situations happen. It's unfortunate, but there's nothing that you can do about it. It's better to just move on. That said, you definitely need to talk to the husband and to try to get on the same page about what is reasonable behavior and what is not reasonable, and to what extent can you avoid trying to get sick. Because clearly you don't agree with them. And then hopefully at some point he will realize and himself stop lying, because lying is not good for your relationship and it's not good for the trust levels in your relationship in the long run either. But that is the part where I would say OP did not help herself by being just a little bit too anxious and then pushing that anxiety on other people and expecting them to meet those standards too much. And you can see here, the first comment says, to me that there's two issues. Number one, that he went into the house. Based on his response, it seems like he tried to distance himself, probably thought it was harmless. That I could forgive. And number two is the fact that he lied. He knew he fucked up and he tried to cover his tracks. The fact that you called him out on it and he blew up means he knows that he was wrong. This bothers me more, because what else is he lying about that you don't know about? And then OP replies, and this here you'll really hear what I mean when I say I think OP has a completely messed up perception of the situation in her head. She says, I think this is why I got so mad, because I originally wasn't irate that he went inside. I just wanted to figure out what had really happened, but then him blowing up really just made things worse, especially because I was trying to be so calm and understanding. I don't believe it. I feel that the more you say, I was super calm and understanding, and if people respond to you being calm and understanding by blowing up, then you are probably not very calm and understanding, and it was just very clear how angry you were. So I think that OP is trying to sell a different story to what actually happened. Another response from OP to the second comment, she says, my mother-in-law is so cautious the fact that she caught it is mind-blowing and really speaks to how contagious it is. I can't wrap my mind around why he would go inside her house, especially after I asked him not to. Now, see, that already says she completely disagreed with him going inside the house, of course. And when she called him up to be like, hey, did you go inside the house? It wasn't from the perspective of, oh, I was just wondering, what happened? It was, how dare you do this? And why did you do this? And we had this conversation before you went. So clearly OP was pissed the whole time. And then she says, I just have no idea how to approach it. And I don't even want to speak to him, even though I know that's childish of me. I'm just so mad. So Ultimately, OP, I think you are setting yourself up for failure by putting a little bit too much stress on your husband to do things your way when he doesn't agree and he doesn't want to. The final comment that I'll read is this one. She says, I take COVID very seriously. Your fear and worry is understandable. It's a scary time for everyone, especially mothers of young babies. But I also think how you approach things determines what outcomes you get. I had very strict parents, so I got very good at bending the truth. Did you discuss with your husband about what you feel are the minimum acceptable precautions and hear his side of it? I feel that many times when the husband is breaking your rules or allowing boundaries to be crossed, it's because he doesn't fully agree. And if he feels like he can't discuss something with you, he'll tell you what he thinks you want to hear and then go ahead and do what he wants anyway. I'm not saying he wasn't wrong. I'm just saying that there are healthier ways to establish and enforce boundaries when it comes to spouses. Exactly. That is 100% what I'm saying. Your husband is a grown adult man who can make his own decisions. You can also assume that he cares about the health of the family and the health of your baby as well. And if you try to approach talking to him from that perspective, I'm very sure that he will respond to it differently, because it's very clear from what you say and how you describe the situation, OP, that he got very insulted and offended at the insinuation that he's the one putting the family in harm's way by doing XYZ. And then OP says, I really appreciate this perspective. I have really bad anxiety. And my husband has admitted that he finds it hard to discuss things with me because I feel so strongly about them. The thing that bothers me is we've both been on the same page about COVID. Very recently, he started to become more relaxed. So I definitely think we should revisit the topic. And there you are. That is the source of the conflict that happened here. It's not so much about COVID. It's not about how you deal with it. It's not about to what extent you try to prevent yourself from catching it. It's not about looking after your babies and trying to make sure that your newborn baby doesn't get sick. It is the fact that when you have a ton of anxiety, it really influences how you interact with the people around you. And when people around you think you're being unreasonable, then it's really hard for them to be honest with you. And the moment it's hard for them to be honest with you, your relationship breaks down because your communication breaks down. So that is the ultimate cause of this particular conflict. I think, OP, you need to have a sit down with your husband, and you probably need to think about your anxiety and to see exactly how it's manifesting itself in your life and what it's causing, because one of the things it's causing is a ton of conflict in your marriage, and that is conflict that can be avoided and that can be solved.